The first time I stood alone with the Mona Lisa, it wasn't the smile that unsettled me. It was the silence around it, the kind that presses against your ears, as if the room itself is listening. The museum had closed hours ago, yet the painting seemed awake, alert in a way no oil and wood should be. Up close, the colors felt warmer than memory allowed. Her eyes followed no one, yet refused to let me go. I had studied this face for years in books and lectures, reduced it to technique and theory, but standing there, I felt the irrational certainty that the woman knew she was being watched and had known it for centuries. There was a faint crack along the varnish, barely visible under the lamp. When I leaned closer, my breath fogged the glass, and for a moment the smile seemed to tighten, as if reacting. I told myself it was fatigue, imagination, the museum playing tricks on a tired mind. Still, I stepped back. Because something about her expression had changed, not enough to be seen, only enough to be felt. And deep down, beneath reason and scholarship, I understood a truth I was not ready to name. This portrait was never meant to be finished, and it was never meant to be silent. The power of using an already famous face like the Mona Lisa in storytelling lies in the way recognition works inside the human mind. When people encounter something they already know, their brain reacts faster and more emotionally than it does to something unfamiliar. The Mona Lisa is not just a painting, it is one of the most recognized images in human history. Even people who have never visited a museum or studied art know her face, her posture, and most importantly, her smile. This instant recognition removes the need for explanation and background, allowing a story to begin at full intensity from the very first second. Familiarity creates trust, and trust creates attention. When an audience sees a thumbnail, image, or hears the name the Mona Lisa, they subconsciously feel grounded because they believe they understand what they are looking at. This sense of comfort lowers their defenses. Horror and mystery work best when the audience feels safe just long enough for that safety to be taken away. A completely unknown character or object takes time to establish emotional grounding, but the Mona Lisa arrives with centuries of cultural weight already attached to her. The audience feels they know her, and that belief makes any distortion, movement, or hidden truth feel far more disturbing. Another reason a famous face is so effective is that it carries shared memory. Millions of people across different cultures have seen the same image, read the same theories, and heard the same rumors. When a story uses the Mona Lisa, it taps into a collective imagination rather than a single viewpoint. The smile has been debated for hundreds of years, which means your story does not introduce mystery, it amplifies one that already exists. The audience is not being told that something is strange, they already feel that something is strange, and the story simply gives shape to that unease. The brain also processes faces differently from other images. Humans are biologically wired to study faces for emotion, intent, and threat. A famous face becomes even more powerful because people believe they understand it, yet the Mona Lisa resists clear interpretation. Her expression is neither happy nor sad, neither welcoming nor hostile. This ambiguity creates a psychological gap, and storytelling thrives inside gaps. When a story suggests that the smile hides something unnatural, the idea feels plausible because the face has never fully revealed itself to begin with. Using a globally recognized image also shortens the distance between the story and the viewer. The audience does not feel like they are watching a fictional world, they feel like something is happening to a real object that exists in their world. This blurring of fiction and reality increases tension. When a horror story involves a made-up painting, the fear stays contained within the narrative. When it involves the Mona Lisa, the fear leaks outward. Viewers may remember seeing the painting in books, classrooms, or documentaries, and that memory becomes infected by the story. The next time they see her face, the story resurfaces in their mind without effort. There is also a sense of forbidden intimacy when a story claims to reveal something hidden within a famous image. People are drawn to secrets, especially when those secrets are tied to something iconic. The idea that millions have looked at the Mona Lisa and missed something crucial creates a quiet anxiety. It suggests that reality itself can hide things in plain sight. This taps into a deeper fear that the world is not as stable or as transparent as it appears, and that truth may be layered beneath surfaces we trust. From a modern content perspective, familiarity drives clicks before it drives fear. In a fast-scrolling environment, attention is currency. A recognizable face stops the scroll because the brain prioritizes known patterns over unknown ones. This is why stories based on famous figures or objects consistently outperform original but unfamiliar concepts. Once attention is secured, the story can then subvert expectations. The audience comes for what they recognize and stays for what unsettles them. The Mona Lisa also benefits from being culturally neutral yet universally known. Unlike characters tied to specific religions, nations, or ideologies, her image belongs to everyone and no one. This allows a story to reach a wide audience without resistance. The fear does not come from belief systems or law, it comes from perception itself. The story does not ask the audience to accept a myth, only to question what they think they see. Another subtle advantage of a famous face is that it challenges authority and knowledge. The Mona Lisa has been studied by experts, historians, and scientists. When a story implies that something about her has been overlooked or deliberately hidden, it creates tension between official knowledge and personal experience. The viewer begins to wonder whether expertise can truly explain everything, or whether some truths exist beyond documentation. This doubt strengthens the atmosphere of mystery and gives the story a lingering psychological impact. In horror and suspense, the most effective fear is not created by monsters, but by altered meaning. A smile that once symbolized art and beauty becoming a signal of awareness or intent is deeply unsettling because it rewrites meaning without changing form. The face remains the same, yet the way the audience perceives it shifts permanently. This transformation is far more powerful when the original image is already deeply embedded in cultural memory, because the change feels like a violation rather than a creation. Ultimately, the strength of using the Mona Lisa as the foundation of a story comes from the collision between the known and the unknown. The audience believes they are looking at something familiar, something understood, something safe, and the story slowly erodes that belief by suggesting that familiarity itself is an illusion, that recognition does not equal understanding, and that some faces are remembered not because they reveal truth, but because they hide it so perfectly that no one ever thinks to look beyond the surface of the smile that has watched generations pass, unchanged, patient, and endlessly observed yet never fully seen, as if the act of being recognized has always been the mask rather than the revelation. The mystery of the Mona Lisa's smile is not simply an artistic curiosity, it is a psychological phenomenon that has endured because it refuses to settle into a single emotional category. When people look at the painting, they instinctively search for meaning in her expression, yet the smile slips away the moment they try to define it. This uncertainty creates a tension that feels personal, as if the painting is responding differently to each viewer. In storytelling, this kind of ambiguity is extremely powerful because it invites the audience to participate rather than observe. The story does not tell them what to feel, it lets their own perception become part of the experience. The human mind is uncomfortable with unresolved signals, especially when they come from faces. We rely on facial expressions to judge safety, intention, and emotion. A smile usually signals warmth or reassurance, but the Mona Lisa's smile does not fully commit to those meanings. It hovers between friendliness and detachment, creating a subtle unease. This is why the smile has been described as haunting, knowing, or even mocking. When a story leans into this uncertainty, it activates a deep psychological response because it mirrors a real-world discomfort that people already experience when looking at the painting. What makes the smile especially effective in horror or mystery storytelling is that it appears to change without actually changing. Viewers often report that the expression looks different depending on the angle, lighting, or even their mood. This perceived movement without physical movement opens the door to unsettling interpretations. A story can suggest that the smile reacts to attention, grows stronger when stared at, or fades when ignored. Because people have already felt something similar in real life, these ideas do not feel exaggerated, they feel like extensions of an existing phenomenon. The smile also creates a sense of intelligence, as if there is awareness behind it. Unlike exaggerated or emotional expressions, subtle smiles imply control. They suggest restraint, secrecy, and intention. In narrative terms, this gives the painting agency without requiring overt action. The Mona Lisa does not need to move, speak, or change form to feel alive. The smile alone can carry the suggestion that something is being withheld. This is far more disturbing than obvious horror elements because it allows fear to grow quietly, without spectacle. Another reason the smile works so well is that it reverses the direction of observation. Instead of the viewer studying the painting, the viewer begins to feel studied. The expression seems to acknowledge the act of being watched, which creates a psychological loop. The more attention the audience gives, the more aware the painting seems to become. In storytelling, this dynamic can be used to blur the boundary between subject and object, making the audience question who holds power in the interaction. The smile becomes a mirror, reflecting curiosity back at the observer in an unsettling way. The ambiguity of the smile also allows it to absorb meaning from the story itself. Depending on the narrative context, it can appear compassionate, cruel, amused, or predatory. This flexibility makes it an ideal anchor for suspense because it adapts to the emotional tone without needing to change its appearance. A single line of narration or a shift in lighting can transform the smile from comforting to threatening. The audience feels this shift intuitively, even if they cannot articulate why, which makes the experience more immersive. Culturally, the smile has been analyzed, theorized, and mythologized to the point where it exists somewhere between reality and legend. People have heard claims about hidden emotions, medical conditions, or optical illusions, but none of these explanations fully resolve the mystery. This unresolved status keeps the smile alive in the public imagination. When a story builds on this, it feels like a continuation of a long conversation rather than a new invention. The audience feels as though they are stepping into an ongoing enigma rather than being introduced to a fictional device. The smile's subtlety also forces restraint in storytelling, which often leads to stronger horror. Instead of relying on sudden shocks or explicit threats, the narrative can focus on slow realization and internal dread. The fear does not come from what the painting does, but from what it might be capable of. This potential is more frightening than action because it leaves room for imagination, and imagination tends to create fears more personal and lasting than anything shown directly. There is also an emotional contradiction embedded in the smile. It suggests warmth, yet it feels distant. It invites attention, yet withholds connection. This contradiction creates cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort that keeps the viewer engaged. In a story, this can translate into a sense of attraction mixed with fear. The audience may feel drawn to the painting even as they sense something is wrong. This push and pull deepens suspense and mirrors the way people respond to things they cannot fully understand but cannot ignore either. On a deeper level, the smile challenges the idea of transparency in human expression. We like to believe that faces reveal truth, that emotions can be read and understood. The Mona Lisa quietly contradicts this belief. Her smile suggests that expression can be a veil rather than a window. When a story emphasizes this idea, it taps into a subtle existential fear that others may not be as readable as we assume, and that understanding may always be incomplete. This fear resonates beyond the painting and into everyday human interactions. In narrative terms, the smile functions as a silent promise. It implies that something lies beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered, but never fully offering itself. The audience senses that there is a moment of revelation approaching, even if it never arrives. This anticipation keeps tension alive throughout the story. The smile does not resolve the mystery, it sustains it, making every glance feel like it might be the one that finally reveals the truth, while always stopping just short of certainty, leaving the viewer suspended in that fragile space between curiosity and unease, where meaning feels close enough to touch yet forever just out of reach. The idea that security cameras record subtle changes in the Mona Lisa's expression at night draws its power from the intersection of technology, trust, and fear. Cameras are designed to be objective witnesses. People rely on them precisely because they do not blink, imagine, or misremember. When a story suggests that something impossible is captured by surveillance, it undermines the audience's faith in mechanical truth. If even machines can record something that should not exist, then denial becomes harder. The fear no longer belongs only to the human mind, it is validated by cold, impartial observation. Nighttime intensifies this effect because it is a liminal space between control and vulnerability. Museums by day are structured, guarded, and full of noise and movement. By night, they become vast, hollow spaces where objects outnumber people. The Mona Lisa hanging alone in the dark feels fundamentally different from the Mona Lisa surrounded by crowds. When a story places the changes in expression specifically during closed hours, it implies intention. The painting does not react randomly, it reacts when it is unobserved, or perhaps when it believes it is unobserved, which introduces the unsettling possibility of awareness. Security footage carries a unique psychological weight because it is retrospective. The horror is not experienced in the moment but discovered later. A guard rewinding footage, a technician reviewing timestamps, a curator watching a screen alone in a quiet room all experience fear delayed, amplified by repetition. The ability to pause, zoom, and replay does not bring clarity, it deepens uncertainty. Each viewing invites doubt. Was that shadow always there? Did the mouth curve more sharply? Did the eyes narrow, or is it compression noise? The story thrives in this uncertainty because every rational explanation feels insufficient. The notion of subtle change is far more disturbing than obvious transformation. If the painting smiled widely, moved its head, or stepped out of the frame, the mind could label it as fantasy. A barely perceptible shift in expression, however, forces the viewer to question their own perception. Subtlety creates plausible deniability. Characters in the story can argue, dismiss, and rationalize, mirroring the audience's internal conflict. This slow erosion of certainty creates psychological horror rather than shock-based fear. Cameras also introduce the idea of angles and frames. The Mona Lisa has been photographed countless times, yet security cameras see her differently. They capture her from fixed positions, under artificial lighting, often at low resolution. This imperfect vision adds to the unease. The audience understands that the camera might miss something the eye would catch, or catch something the eye would dismiss. When a story suggests that the expression changes only from certain angles or under infrared light, it implies that reality itself depends on how it is observed. Another unsettling aspect is the absence of human presence. The changes occur when no one is in the room, suggesting that observation itself may suppress them. This reverses a common assumption that things exist to be seen. Instead, the painting appears to act when it believes it is alone. This creates a disturbing parallel to human behavior, where intent is often revealed only in private. The painting begins to feel less like an object and more like a being with a sense of privacy and restraint. The recorded changes also create a chain of secrecy and obsession. Once someone notices the anomaly, they become complicit. Do they report it and risk ridicule, or do they keep watching? The footage becomes a forbidden archive, replayed late at night, frame by frame. The act of watching becomes ritualistic, almost devotional. The story can explore how repeated exposure erodes skepticism and replaces it with fixation. The viewer stops asking whether the change is real and starts waiting for it to happen again. Technology in horror often fails suddenly or dramatically, but here it functions perfectly. The cameras do not malfunction. The timestamps are correct. The files are intact. This reliability makes the anomaly more threatening. The story does not rely on broken systems but on systems doing exactly what they are meant to do. The implication is that reality itself is the glitch, not the equipment. There is also an inherent cruelty in recorded evidence that cannot be confronted. The painting cannot be questioned. It cannot explain itself. The footage offers proof without context. This asymmetry creates helplessness. Characters may feel watched by something they cannot address or understand. The painting becomes an observer captured by an observer, creating a loop that feels infinite and inescapable. Security footage also carries the suggestion of accumulation over time. One night's change might be dismissed, but weeks of footage showing minute progression becomes harder to ignore. The smile grows incrementally sharper. The eyes appear more focused. The transformation is so slow that it feels deliberate, patient. This patience implies longevity and purpose, qualities that feel deeply inhuman. The painting is not reacting impulsively, it is waiting. The idea that the changes are only noticed after careful review introduces guilt. How long has this been happening unnoticed? How many nights passed before someone looked closely enough? This raises the possibility that the painting has always been capable of this, hidden behind inattention. The horror shifts from what is happening now to what may have been happening forever. Finally, surveillance turns the audience into watchers as well. Knowing that the story involves recorded footage encourages readers or viewers to imagine themselves pausing the image, staring at the mouth, comparing frames. The fear becomes participatory. The audience is no longer just consuming a narrative, they are mentally reenacting the act of discovery. The Mona Lisa does not need to move in front of them. It is enough to suggest that somewhere, in a quiet room lit only by a monitor's glow, her expression changes by a fraction of a degree when the museum sleeps and no human eyes are meant to be there, as if the painting understands the difference between being seen and being recorded and chooses the moment when belief is weakest to reveal just enough to be undeniable yet never enough to be explained. The discovery of a hidden layer beneath the Mona Lisa's surface shifts the story from observation to intrusion, transforming mystery into transgression. When advanced imaging reveals symbols buried under the visible paint, the act feels less like research and more like uncovering something deliberately concealed. This is unsettling because it reframes the painting not as a finished masterpiece, but as a sealed object, closer to a container than a canvas. The idea that something lies underneath suggests intent, secrecy, and a decision to hide knowledge rather than display it, which immediately introduces a sense of forbidden territory. Hidden layers imply time stacked upon time. Paint covering paint becomes a metaphor for history overwritten, memory suppressed, truths buried rather than erased. In storytelling, this creates the impression that the Mona Lisa is not a single moment captured forever, but a process that was interrupted or restrained. The audience begins to wonder why the original layer was concealed and who made the decision to hide it. This question is more disturbing than a simple revelation because it implies that someone knew the truth and chose silence. The symbols themselves deepen the unease, especially when they are linked to forbidden anatomical studies. Anatomy carries an inherent intimacy. To study the human body is to cross boundaries between the external and the internal, the visible and the hidden. When a story connects these symbols to secret studies, it suggests knowledge gained through violation rather than observation. This turns the act of painting into something closer to experimentation, where the subject is not merely represented but used. The Mona Lisa ceases to be a portrait and becomes evidence. Forbidden knowledge has always carried a particular kind of fear because it suggests consequences. These are not symbols meant to enlighten, but symbols meant to be hidden, implying that understanding them comes at a cost. The story gains weight by suggesting that the painter was not merely an artist but a seeker who went too far, crossing ethical and natural limits. This reframes genius as obsession and creativity as compulsion, making the artwork feel dangerous rather than admirable. The phrase "unfinished life" introduces a chilling ambiguity. It suggests that the painting was not meant to depict life, but to preserve it, continue it, or perhaps complete it later. This idea destabilizes the boundary between representation and existence. A portrait is supposed to imitate life, not participate in it. When the story implies that life itself was interrupted and stored within layers of paint, the Mona Lisa becomes less an image and more a suspended state, neither alive nor dead. This concept also introduces moral tension. If life was unfinished, then someone made a decision to stop it, pause it, or trap it. The painting becomes complicit in that act. Every brushstroke on the surface becomes part of a seal rather than a display. The smile, once seen as enigmatic beauty, now reads as containment, a mask holding something in place. Beauty becomes camouflage, hiding the true function of the work from generations of viewers. From a psychological perspective, hidden layers are frightening because they suggest that surfaces lie. The audience is forced to reconsider the reliability of what they see. If something as studied and revered as the Mona Lisa can hide such meaning, then nothing visible can be fully trusted. This fear extends beyond the painting and into perception itself. The story quietly implies that truth is not revealed by looking harder, but by knowing where to cut. The use of modern technology to uncover these layers adds another dimension. Advanced scans feel clinical, scientific, and objective, yet what they reveal is deeply unnatural. This contrast heightens discomfort. Science is expected to explain, but here it exposes something that resists explanation. The symbols do not fit neatly into known languages or systems. They appear purposeful yet unreadable, as if meant for a future observer rather than the present one. There is also a violation inherent in uncovering hidden layers. The act of scanning, peeling back, and revealing feels invasive. The painting, once passive, becomes a victim of curiosity. This reversal creates unease because the audience may begin to sympathize with the object rather than the investigator. The question shifts from what is hidden to whether it should have been revealed at all. Curiosity transforms into guilt. Linking the symbols to anatomy further personalizes the fear. Anatomy is the study of what lies beneath skin. To place anatomical symbolism beneath paint suggests a parallel between body and canvas. The Mona Lisa becomes a skin stretched over something internal. The idea that paint functions like flesh makes the artwork feel disturbingly organic. The hidden layer is no longer just information, it is interiority. The promise of unfinished life also introduces anticipation without resolution. It implies continuation without specifying form. Is the life meant to resume, to awaken, or to transfer? The lack of clarity is intentional and effective. The audience fills the gap with their own fears. The story does not need to explain how life persists within paint, it only needs to suggest that it does. This hidden layer reframes every previous mystery. The changing expression, the sense of awareness, the discomfort viewers feel all become symptoms rather than coincidences. The painting is no longer mysterious because it is artful, it is mysterious because it is incomplete. Something was started and never allowed to finish. This incompletion creates tension that feels active rather than historical, as if the painting is still waiting for the final step. The concept also challenges the idea of legacy. Art is meant to outlive the artist, but here it may also outlive the subject in a more literal way. The painting becomes a vessel carrying intention across centuries. Those who uncover its hidden layer become part of that intention whether they want to or not. The story gains momentum by suggesting that discovery is not neutral, that seeing the truth binds the observer to it. Ultimately, the hidden symbols and the promise of unfinished life transform the Mona Lisa from a static icon into a dormant process. The painting is not complete because completion would mean release. The surface exists to delay something, to keep it suspended between states. Every generation that admires the smile unknowingly participates in maintaining that suspension, reinforcing the seal by believing the painting is finished when it never was and by mistaking preservation for safety when in truth it may be containment waiting for the moment when the layers are finally breached and what was never meant to remain incomplete resumes the life that was paused beneath the surface. The realization that the smile is not timeless but waiting reframes the entire experience of the Mona Lisa from passive observation to active selection. At first, the narrator believes they are studying a masterpiece, engaging in an act that countless others have performed before. This belief offers safety in numbers, the comfort of shared experience. When that belief collapses, the fear becomes intimate. The painting is no longer an object encountered by chance, it is an entity participating in the encounter, measuring attention, weighing curiosity, and responding with intent. Waiting implies patience, and patience implies purpose. A thing that waits expects something specific to happen. This shifts the mystery away from randomness and toward design. The smile ceases to be an accidental ambiguity of technique and becomes a signal, a held expression maintained across centuries not because it is unfinished, but because it is perfectly controlled. The narrator understands that the smile has endured not through neglect or preservation alone, but through discipline, as though it has been conserving itself for a moment that has only now arrived. The idea of being chosen is more disturbing than being attacked. Violence can be resisted or escaped, but selection feels inevitable. When the narrator realizes the smile has chosen its next witness, fear becomes personal rather than theoretical. This is no longer about what the painting can do, but about why it has chosen now and why it has chosen them. The realization introduces a sense of predestination, as though every step leading to this moment was guided by an unseen hand that needed a specific kind of observer. This selection is not random, it is based on perception. The painting does not choose the strongest, the loudest, or the most important, but the one who sees too closely. The narrator understands that attention itself is the invitation. To notice the smile's subtle shifts, to question its meaning, to linger when others move on is to signal readiness. The fear lies in the implication that curiosity is not harmless, that the desire to understand can mark a person as receptive, vulnerable, and useful. The smile waiting also implies hunger, though not in a physical sense. It suggests a need that can only be satisfied through witnessing. The painting does not seek destruction, it seeks continuation. The witness becomes part of the process that has been unfolding for centuries. This reframes the role of the observer from passive viewer to necessary participant. The narrator realizes that the painting's power does not activate on its own, it requires someone to complete the circuit by recognizing what the smile truly is. Time plays a crucial role in this understanding. The smile has remained unchanged through wars, revolutions, restorations, and endless scrutiny. This endurance now feels less like permanence and more like restraint. The narrator senses that the smile has been practicing stillness, refining its ability to appear inert. Waiting becomes a skill, one honed across generations. The painting has learned when not to act, when to remain indistinguishable from art, when to allow disbelief to protect it. The moment of realization isolates the narrator from everyone else. Others may stand in front of the painting and see beauty, history, or technique, but the narrator sees intent. This creates a private terror that cannot be shared without sounding irrational. The knowledge becomes a burden carried alone. The painting's choice severs the narrator from ordinary perception, placing them in a category defined by awareness rather than action. There is also an implication of succession. If the painting chooses witnesses, then there have been others before. The narrator begins to sense echoes of previous observers who may have reached the same realization and then vanished into obscurity, madness, or silence. The absence of recorded accounts becomes meaningful. The lack of testimony suggests not that nothing happened, but that those who understood were unable or unwilling to speak. The painting's history is no longer measured in years but in witnesses. The smile choosing its next witness also introduces the idea of consent blurred by ignorance. The narrator did not agree to this role, yet their actions led them here. This raises unsettling questions about responsibility. Is the painting acting, or is it responding? Did the narrator activate something dormant, or were they always meant to arrive? The fear deepens because there is no clear boundary between cause and effect. As the narrator internalizes this truth, the environment changes subtly. The museum feels less like a public space and more like a threshold. Every step away from the painting feels provisional, as though distance does not equal escape. The narrator understands that being chosen does not require proximity. The smile has already registered them. The act of seeing has already occurred, and it cannot be undone. The idea of waiting also strips urgency from the painting's behavior, which paradoxically increases dread. A creature that rushes can be interrupted, but something that waits can outlast resistance. The narrator realizes that the painting does not need to act now. It has time. It always has. This patience makes the threat feel infinite rather than immediate, a presence that can surface at any moment rather than all at once. There is a quiet cruelty in the realization that the smile may look the same to everyone else. The narrator may return to the painting with others and see no change, hear no alarm, find no proof. The choice is invisible, known only to the chosen. This secrecy protects the painting and isolates the witness. Fear becomes internalized, turning inward rather than outward, where it can grow unchecked. Ultimately, the understanding that the smile is waiting reframes existence itself as conditional. To see deeply is to risk being seen in return. The narrator realizes that the Mona Lisa has never been mysterious because it hides meaning, but because it observes meaning forming in others. The smile is not an expression frozen in time but a response delayed, held until the moment someone looks not for art or history but for truth, and in doing so becomes visible to something that has been watching for centuries, selecting patiently, knowing that sooner or later someone will look long enough to be recognized as the next witness and step unknowingly into a role that cannot be refused. Once the smile decides that waiting is over, the realization does not arrive all at once. It settles slowly, like dust after a door has been closed. The narrator leaves the museum, steps into the open air, feels the relief of distance, and yet nothing feels finished. The world looks the same, but it no longer feels separate. Every reflection in glass, every painted face in passing advertisements, every photograph with eyes that seem too aware carries a faint echo of that smile. Sleep becomes shallow. Dreams are filled with stillness rather than motion. In them, the Mona Lisa never moves, never changes, yet the narrator knows with absolute certainty that something is happening. The waiting has shifted. It is no longer confined to the canvas. The smile has learned the shape of the narrator's attention, the rhythm of their thoughts, the way curiosity returns even when fear tries to suppress it. Days pass. News reports remain ordinary. The painting hangs as it always has. Tourists gather, phones rise, flashes blink. No alarms sound. No one notices anything wrong. This is when the truth becomes unbearable. The danger was never meant to be shared. The painting does not reveal itself to crowds. It requires intimacy. It requires a single, sustained gaze. The narrator understands now why there are no records, no warnings, no legends that go far enough. Those who realized the truth did not disappear suddenly. They simply faded from relevance. Their lives continued, but something essential had been reassigned. They became carriers rather than witnesses, extensions of a process that could not remain confined to wood and paint forever. One evening, without deciding to, the narrator sits down to write. Not a confession. Not a warning. Just an attempt to describe the smile as it truly is. The words feel guided, precise in a way that does not belong to them. With every sentence, the memory sharpens instead of fading. The act of describing becomes another form of looking. That is when the narrator feels it for the first time, either shift. Not in the world, not in the room, but within perception itself. Faces begin to linger a fraction too long. Expressions seem rehearsed. Smiles feel measured. The narrator realizes that the painting never needed to leave the museum. It only needed a way to continue seeing. The final understanding is quiet and absolute. The Mona Lisa was never watching everyone. It was teaching someone how to watch on its behalf. The waiting was not for freedom, but for succession. The smile does not belong to the painting alone. It is a pattern, a posture, a way of holding expression just long enough to invite attention without revealing intent. Somewhere, behind glass and guards, the painting hangs unchanged. Visitors still debate the mystery of her smile, still search for meaning in pigment and technique. None of them notice that the waiting has ended, because the smile no longer needs to remain where it began, having found what it was always looking for in the one who finally understood that the last step was never about escaping the gaze, but about learning how to return it, patiently, convincingly, and without ever needing to move at all.